Hello and welcome in. Welcoming you into this space. How are you doing? So I just want to recap a little bit what this last week has been for myself, but of course, as we know, we all are having similar experiences energetically, even though the specifics of our experiences will play out differently. Last week for myself was a bit of this chaotic trying to figure where I was standing, where I was putting my feet. And energies seem to have subsided somewhat in regards to that. And the issues surrounding that for myself were essentially where do I put my mind in regards to what is going on? Yes, we have this situation that is continuing to expand and grow. And what is the root of that? And do I need to be focused on that? Do I need to figure the origin of that? What is the cause of that in order to know how to proceed in my daily life, in my work? For many of us, this work is our life. It is why we are here. So those lines start to blend and all starts to become one. And I'm not using specific words anymore to describe these energies and these situations. Because what continues to become more and more apparent to me is the way that everything has been assigned a specific meaning. That we can talk in more general terms and connect into the center of our being, into our light, into our energy, into the center of who we are, and receive the guidance, receive that energy without using those pre-templated, pre-described meanings. So in many ways, we are redefining our reality on many, many different levels, on all levels, in fact, at this point in time. So for me personally, let's see, today is third. I'm actually losing track of time, right? Without these schedules of the school day, which is interesting in and of itself. What is playing out for many of us is recognizing where this deep, deep programming has been in our own lives. Even though we feel we've been doing so much work all along the way to root these things out, it's more as if we have pre-identified, put a marker in our field, and now is the time to really be able to uproot and pull that out of our fields in order to realign to our truth. So for myself, in our family, we have had an unfortunate illness. My father suffered a heart attack on Sunday. And with that, it's unusual to be in the midst of a situation like this and not be able to be at the hospital, not be able to visit him. And And so that's part of the strangeness around the situation for all of us as a family. And yet, what I started to notice, I will say this, in many ways, this situation that is occurring in our physical reality now, with this situation, it actually exists. It's here where we are in this country. It's going to actually get worse before it gets better. And as people are not following the instructions that have been set out in terms of keeping space, that will continue to be enforced more and more. So it's going to feel like we are receiving this kind of energy even more. However, what I have noticed for me specifically is every place where I start to feel triggered by things that are going on in my own family or the greater environment, I'm having to really work to flip that on its head. We talk about the reversal energies that are here on this planet. This is really what we are working through right now. So where the original origin of design was taken and used in not so brilliant and helpful ways, we are being shown that specifically for ourselves within our own fields, within our own lives, within our own energy, where this has been most detrimental to us. So not everyone may be having a family experience. It may be in some other areas of their lives. For me, I've been closely working, monitoring, following family dysfunction, family systems. It's part of my work on a much deeper level. And so this is really where I'm at right now. And so a lot of the information is being communicated to us as a family through emails, just because there are so many people, right, to call and contact, and all this information exchanging, not being at the medical facility to be able to receive the information and to be there. It is what it is. So we are adjusting and figuring out as we go. And yet what I am noticing as reading words, certain phrases, certain arrangements, personal expressions of what people are feeling and going through, it's jumping off of the page at me, and I'm literally seeing these structures building out of these words, right? And we know words, it's more than words, it's energy. There's energy behind it. And there's the perception through that energy from which the individual is relaying the words, right? So, and again, I'm not getting totally specific, and I understand if this is a bit frustrating. But it's also so that you can take this and use this that I'm laying out to recognize within your own situation where it's playing out for you. So what was happening as I was reading these emails, information, even having conversations with people, understanding as a very, very sensitive person that I am reading beneath what is being said and what is being presented at the surface, at the physical level. And so it's triggering, I would say triggering in the sense that it's pulling up now everywhere that programming is embedded in me as a result of those past experiences, where that programming was always present through that person, how I took on that, and now that plays out in my own life with my own children, my own family now. So I've been talking about this parent-child structure, and I don't mean it in terms of the family dynamics, although it does relate perfectly. The parent-child relationship is something that we use in drafting programs and information systems, right? So it's where you would set up the parent template, and then you can create subsets out of that, meaning that when you open up this specific template, certain attributes are already defined And then any template or drawing that is created from that parent template will then automatically have those qualities. So let's just say, very simple example, all of the walls that we draw in the blueprint are going to be the color blue so that we can identify them. Let's say the internal walls, because a structure can have external walls as well, right? But external walls tend to be thicker. They're made of a different material. So in order to differentiate, we're going to call the internal walls, the walls that are inside the structure, we're going to label them with a blue color and label them in the index a specific material like drywall. So it's going to have a particular thickness to it set up already, right? And then all the walls will follow this system. This is a quality or an attribute that is set into the template itself, right? So that then by default, every drawing that we open up through this parent template now has these same qualities. And you can start to see how this does relate to the systems of energy. Because we say as children, we take on the wounding, as it's been called. You know, I don't follow that. I believe it comes just like it's defined in the template. That template comes from somewhere beyond the actual human experience. But this is what we have kind of taken on as a way to understand it in family therapy and psychotherapy, this kind of stuff, right? So it's very interesting that we can still use that information to pinpoint within our own lives. And yet we're talking about something much greater. So for myself, I have been paying attention to where this is being shown now. We're shining the light on the blue walls. We're saying, wow, actually, what is drywall made of? What are the components, this gypsum and other things that go in to the drywall? Why did we even choose that in the first place? Why did we not use something else? Well, that was the standard that was available at the time, right? This was commonly accepted. And so we passed that on. And yet every day we know we make new inventions. We create new, more efficient ways to build, to design, to be able to live in a more new, more modern way within our physical reality. So we can use that imagery through building design, through product design, to also understand that's where we are moving as well. And it's not about staying in the why did this happen from the parent structure, the parent template. It's about understanding that we're here now in what we would call the child drawing or the child template. And this is where we make the actual changes, because this is what is also interesting about these drawing subsets. Now, let's say we have 3 tiers and we're creating it all out of this parent design, right? So you cannot access what is created here in this 3rd level, in this child level, at the parent level, because that index, that definition doesn't exist. So let's say we're making a drawing, we open it up, we have blue walls. Blue walls exist here, but yet then we're also going to come in and we're going to alter it because we can, because there's new methods of building available. Maybe we're not going to change all the walls. We're just going to change some of the walls. Maybe in the bedrooms, we want a specific type of wall. More soundproofing, perhaps. But that information here in this child subset is not available in the parent template. So we're here, and this is where we're changing what's going on here in our lives. So yes, while it's necessary to understand where it came from, this is where the actual changes happen, in this moment now, in this body that you are living and experiencing in. And so what happened for me as I was starting to read these emails and talking with people, and I started to spin out, because I was like, how in the world can I change everything that's going on right now? What kind of person am I that I'm not able to help this person heal? I'm seeing, it's like, I said to a friend of mine, like, oh my God, all the inner children are coming out to play right now, because everyone's being triggered into their original, right? The origins of where did these patterns of behavior, patterns of response come in? I was watching as each of my siblings are having their specific response to the information, same information I was receiving, right? But we can create all these child templates now from this parent subset, which is essentially what happens, right? So myself, each of my siblings, we have our own template now. So the information that was coming through the parent was being translated differently for each person. I had my reaction, similar, yet very individuated. And the rest of my siblings had their responses, their reactions to it as well. But it all started here, right? Formed within the same template. And yet, for each of us, it's going to be more specific and more individualized as to how we're going to heal and move through this. And so in many ways through this type of healing, we do want to go back to the origin. Where did this come from? And yet, within us, we have to look specifically, how are we responding to it? And realizing that this is really the key here, is that yes, the program exists, but it is, the power lies within our own individual response to it, because we can continue to unknowingly repeat the programming, creating new subsets, right, through the child templates to be carried on. Or we change in the here and now the color of those walls, the depth of those walls, the integrity of that structure. And what is that? That is the light coming forward now. We cannot go back and change the past, but we can most certainly change these templates here and now, so that moving forward, these things are not getting passed on. The light is shining upon them to be released. So also to understand that many of us now, we can start to relate this a bit differently. We are parents, and even if we don't specifically have our own children, we know that what we put out into the world is essentially passing on the patterns, right? Even in other relationships that we interact with. So what happens is when we change the parent, right? If we change this template, we change those walls from red to blue, all of the children then will have this passed down. That will appear in each of these templates. But we essentially are also a parent. So whatever changes we make here continue to get passed on. Right? And then knowing that you can't make changes in the parent without it actually being passed on. So any changes you make here will be passed on. Of course, we're speaking of changes within the light through integrity. But we also know through family dynamics, when one person changes and shifts, it affects all the way around us. Suddenly we stop allowing specific behaviors. We no longer desire to engage with them. So when there is a stop that is put here, anywhere this parent structure doesn't Again, we're not speaking specifically of our own parents, but individual situations where we had these patterns embedded into us, or let's say, because the embedding happens before we actually arrive. But where these patterns were, let's say, what is the word? I'm totally losing this word for it. Anyway, you can have something where it's like activated, right? The pattern is activated and then it takes hold, essentially. Whatever that word is, I can't find it right now. I apologize. So what happens with this situation, whatever this energy is here that created or helped to instill this into this template, now this being, this person, this is essentially harnessing whatever energy was passed down, or harnessing the energy of light through the dysfunctional pattern. So once this dysfunctional pattern says no more, this is no longer a source of power for all of these other templates here, all the way back. So in reality of who we are as light beings, this is our work. We pull up the patterns, we stop them, which affects this entire continuum, backwards and forwards. And that is the beauty of working within the light, that we understand this. So yes, while I'm freaking out in some sense, saying, oh my God, I've seen these patterns, I know it's in my lineage, I know it's in my ancestry, it's been there forever, and feeling that sadness and that grief and that anguish that is coming up through me right now. Okay, but this is why we are here. Because we are able to see it, we are able to understand it, we are able to shift beyond it. And in many ways, this is what we're feeling right now with the situation that is out here in our physical reality. I would say for myself, it's been even more challenging to get up and get to my work, just because I'm feeling the weight. And there's a lot of collective energy that's coming up right now. And so we're saying there's so much light coming in, there's so much light coming in. This is such a wonderful time that's supporting the release. We're like, why doesn't it actually feel that way? I mean, it is, and that's why it feels this way, because we're feeling the weight and the density of it. And so for myself, it's just having to remind myself, just get up out of bed, just get to your work, and you will feel better, because we then go to connect into the light. And I've been saying this for some time, it's going to feel a little bit more challenging to actually connect to our light. Not that it's not present, but because, let's just say, within the airwaves, within the atmosphere, there's so much more that is activated and up and moving through the fields. It's like, where is that light? And if you haven't quite defined how you get there for yourself, how do you tap in? How do you reach that place where you feel connected? It's a bit challenging right now. And so this is what we're working to do, is to really tap into that connection. And I've been doing the Thursday evening groups. I've started Tuesdays now as well to help support this, to provide the time and the space for each of us to individually connect in. And I think it's such a vital part of this work, of what's going on and where the work is moving in the future. It is about the groups. It is about the community. We're seeing the effects of that now as well, too, through the physical, right? It's showing us how people are actually finding relief and connecting in different ways. And it's interesting because even though we are supposed to be more physically separate, somehow there is more connection that's coming through, because we're having to connect from a different place, from our own internal light. We know people are really being forced internally. What is important for you? When we start to come into these places of defining what is important, that automatically connects us to our own field, to our own internal center, right? So these are kind of being forced upon us right now. And it's really brilliant to see the way that even though this is an issue out there with what's happening, this energy that has come through, it's really, we are able to turn it on its head. And I think this is what is so important to recognize as well, as I was saying about this kind of flipping things on its head. Yes, we know we live in a reversed atmosphere, right? The original design intent was taken and used in unhelpful ways, in ways that were designed to essentially do what many of us believe and feel and think we are experiencing in terms of being, put in kind of this prison state, in a sense. And yet we've always lived within that anyway. So it's a bit challenging for the mind to kind of comprehend what's happening here is actually enormous amounts of healing, because it really is flipping everything on its head. And so, again, yes, this is not a situation to be taken lightly. It is coming, it is sweeping through, things are going to get worse before they actually seem to be getting better. So we do have to deal with those ramifications. This is actually happening in our physical reality, regardless of where you believe the origin of it came from. And this is important to understand too, because we can dive into all of these theories, all of these ideas about the negativity that exists here on the planet. And so yes, that may be true, but if that's where we are focusing, that's where we're going to stay stuck. This isn't to say, okay, bad things don't exist out there, we need to bring our attention to it. But if that is not our actual line of work, if we're not out there on the front line, actually working within the government or working within the healthcare system or things like this, that actually is not our job. And it's not really a whole lot of our concern. For many of us, it's to be here, to build from here, to tap into what is here in order to start to express this out in a very physical way. And I've said this year is very much about the light workers, the light beings who are here to shift through these changes, to assist humanity, to get really online with what they're here to do and who they are here to be. And so this is really where the focus needs to be. And we're shown this over and over and over again. It's like you can connect, you can watch all of the information that's out there. You probably find it's not very helpful. You start to feel worse. Your anxiety starts to pick up. And so it is about seeking out the light within. It is about going in and purposely putting yourself there. It doesn't tend to come very naturally right now in the sense of, oh, I should wake up and feel like I'm floating in the ethers. Some people may be able to experience it that way. For a lot of us, our garbage dump is getting cleaned out, and we've been carrying it for a very long time. And that's not our fault. It's been specifically designed to be that way once we got here. But again, regardless of where that came from, this is where the shift happens. This is where the healing happens. This is where the effect happens. We don't affect it by saying and pointing fingers at what's going on over here at all. We do it by focusing here. And that's hard for a lot of people to imagine, but we see this in the physical reality, even when we talk about this 3D system, this 3D world, where a lot of people want to go out and they actually want to be told what to do because they don't want to think for themselves. They don't want to have to make decisions because those decisions may have ramifications. And it's better to say, well, this outside institution told me to do that. So therefore, if it doesn't work out, it's that institution's fault, right? So let's blame the political system or the political structure. And yet, even though we may be subjected to certain rules and laws, we are essentially free. And this is where the internal work is so important. This is where we're going to continue to be pushed. If we're continuing to look here, right, and here. So this is the energetic representation of the systems and structures that we may be pointing our fingers at. And that's not to say that doesn't actually exist. It does. But the work for the majority of us will always be here. And it's once you start to dive into your light and you start to get into your energy and you start to actually see how this plays out and how you can really start to affect this going back, this moving forward. It's incredibly magical. It's incredibly empowering. It's just like when you start to go work out at the gym, right? And you finally start to see some results, even though it may be a few pounds or it may be a few more pounds of weight in terms of weights that you can lift. That's what's inspiring. You start to see a little bit of a shift and a little bit of a difference, and then it builds, right? Exponentially. Suddenly you don't have to talk yourself into getting up out of bed every day. You're excited to go because you realize the benefits. You can see the benefits. And this is what we have to start to do, is to build this empowerment. So many people, we're waiting to feel empowered. We're waiting to see what the light is doing. We're waiting to see the effects that the light we're bringing in is actually happening. We may not actually physically see that for quite a while. We're going to feel it internally first. And this is what is so challenging about this work, and where many people start to question, well, what are we actually doing here? Because we can't see it yet through the physical, perhaps. And that's where it's like, well, it kind of is a bit of a leap of faith. But then you start to feel the internal shift, and you start to notice where, okay, even if I'm walking around and people are going crazy, I'm not feeling crazy. And I know where my center is, and I can come back here. And isn't that what we've been wanting to do for the world and for humanity? Is to provide this structure through the light. So for those of you who, I cannot speak through my words today. For those of you who are experiencing this feeling of the weighted blanket, I was thinking about this morning too, as we're cleaning out my daughter's room, and she had wanted a weighted blanket. And, you know, at the time I was like, yeah, that sounds like a really interesting concept. Like, I'm sure it works as well. And yet one of the problems with the weighted blanket is that it's so freaking heavy. Yes, it can help alleviate anxiety. And yet if you wake up in the middle of the night and you want to turn over, it's like, but you're kind of stuck sometimes. And then it starts to feel like it is like oppressing you a bit. So it's interesting. And then there's the decision of, you know, what do I want to do here? Is this really worth the supposed benefit? And that's a bit what it's feeling like right now. And that's where the challenge is, because we know we're here to do and be more than we are in this moment. And yet it's like having to actually lift this weighted blanket and say, okay, I don't need a blanket to relieve my anxiety anymore, which these external structures to tell me it's going to be okay because it's promising me the benefits in whatever way that is. Right? Isn't that even interesting when we talk about jobs? Like, what benefits does it offer? The benefit is not the job itself or taking pride in the work that you're doing. The benefit is which in many ways we can see as oppression sometimes. Because then we're told where to go, how we have to deal with issues that come up in our life. So right now, what is the feeling of this weighted blanket on top of us? And what are we going to do? Are we going to lay there and feel more restricted by something that is supposed to be helping us? Or are we going to throw it off and get up and walk around on our own? Knowing full and well that we can alleviate our own anxiety by looking here, by looking within this template, by understanding where that came from. And this is why this is important, because it helps us pinpoint. Okay, why was that decision to make the walls red done back then? Okay, that makes sense. But now this is more appropriate, and this is the direction that I'm choosing to go in. And for many of us, it feels like breaking away from the family system or these cycles or these patterns does feel like death sometimes, because it has occurred lifetime after lifetime as well. It's like, you can't move away from us. You can't go in a different direction. Who do you think you are? And this is what's been ingrained lifetime after lifetime and after lifetime. It's not just in this lifetime. This goes way back, sometimes to the beginning of our inception here on this planet. So when it feels like we're going through something massive in this external world, feeling it in our internal, it's because we are. We're breaking through lifetimes of these parent systems that have been instilled within us. So I hope you are well. I hope you are finding the joy, being able to connect into the light at some points during your day. And of course, if you want more support, like I said, I do the Tuesday and Thursday group sessions now in the evening, 7 p.m. Central Time as well. There's always more available. All my information would be in the description box. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. We'll talk soon.